Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome once again to another episode of the Swinging Palm Trees podcast, where I chat with my guests about their lived experiences, what they're up to, and of course, they share a quote or a saying that continually inspires them. My guest, well, not my guest, my name is Akin, and I have the privilege of talking to a man he has so many titles, I'm going to just read them through. He's a philanthropist, he's a filmmaker, he's a seaplane pilot, he's a homeschooling parent, he's a startup entrepreneur. The man is, what more can I say? Anyway, to you, the listener, may I present to you Mr. Charlie Lamdin. Charlie, thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So, my very first question, like I normally ask most of my guests, is how are you today?
I've had a great day. Thank you. I've had a great 2 days. It's been a smashing start to my week.
Oh, snap. What'd you get up to?
It's just work has been like this year has been one of the hardest years I can ever remember from a work point of view. And the grind has been grinding as hard as it ever gets to grind. And there's been life events happening, illnesses, families, all kinds of stuff. It's just been really hard. And so when you have a couple of days when things pick up and start to get better than you expect, got to welcome those days and go, yeah, that's a good day. So it's been a good day, and it's lovely to finish today talking to you.
You see, I'm the polar opposite. When things seem to be going really well, I'm beginning to think, okay, what's the catch? Something's going to go wrong somewhere. Now, I'm not a pessimist, I'm more of a realist
Me too.
because I just know that when things are going well, all of a sudden my Nigeria defenses, my Yoruba defenses kick up like, something ain't right somewhere. But I'm happy that things are going very well for you. So, mazel tov. So, the first real question is London house prices. Well, London house prices.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, London has had so far probably the worst of it. It was hit. So I mean, my channel, my Moving Hammer Charlie channel, took off back in summer 2022 when I did a video entitled "8 Reasons House Prices Will Collapse." And because of my work, my day job has been in the residential property sector, providing software systems to estate agents for 25 years. And what I didn't realize is that background has given me a real insight to what's happening in the housing market right now, here today. So a long way in advance of what comes out in the papers. And I saw what was happening. I saw the market was turning. But in 2022, we just had a few years of everything going up and everything being fantastic. And London house prices in particular, well, actually, there are flat prices and there are house prices. London flat prices stopped going up in 2016, 2017, actually. Obviously, there was a terrible disaster at Grenfell. That also massively affected all leasehold properties. Leaseholds became less attractive. Service charges have gone up. So freehold properties in London have fared better than leasehold, but especially in prime central London, house prices have taken a big old hit. Some of the boroughs in London have seen 20-25% price drops from the peak already.
Now, when you say there's been a price drop, that still doesn't fill many people with confidence, considering how much the prices of houses are in
Well,
London. Why is it the case that okay, yes, it's London, yes, it's a central hotbed, what have you, but prices notwithstanding still seem to be in a position which is out of reach for many people.
yeah, absolutely right. I mean, they are in London. They are 8 to 10 times people's salary, and far outside, beyond what is within the reach of anyone who's got. Even people with good jobs, even people with six-figure incomes, can't afford the home that they'd like to have and raise a family in London. And I get my followers telling me this on a daily basis. And unfortunately, that is the result of 25, 30 years of I mean, London is a bit of an outlier because it's a very, very popular city with international buyers, and something like half of all buyers in London are coming from overseas. So you have a lot of wealthy overseas buyers buying in London. That's been one reason that London has over the long term, grown more than anywhere else. But the Help to Buy scheme that has now thankfully ended, which is not a good thing for the people who bought with it. In London, Help to Buy was the government lending you 40% of your purchase price. And what that did was it massively inflated prices. For the 10 years that scheme was in place, as suddenly, because the developers could sell things with this big premium, and buyers could borrow this money from the government on top of their mortgage, it just literally actually inflated it like a balloon. Then you have, after the 2008 downturn, the financial crisis in 2008, you had interest rates and mortgage rates going, what's the word I'm looking for? Artificially low. And they were artificially low for such a long time that a whole new generation of buyers appeared thinking that this was the norm. And what's happened now is that mortgage rates have returned to what is normal at around about 5%. But that is normal in the long term. And it's made all those properties that were bought with 1% to 2% mortgages, suddenly the mortgage payment has gone through the roof. And so low interest rates, Help to Buy, and a lot of overseas buyers means that London has been just so oversubscribed by both buyers and renters for a long time. It's stopped getting worse. It's gradually improving at the moment for a while. I think it will continue to gradually improve for a couple more years. Even rents in London now have stopped rising. There are places where they're still very, very high, but there are places in London now where there are actually some properties on the market to rent that no one's actually renting them. So I think we might be past the worst for rent increases in London already. I think flat prices in London are at best going to flatline and maybe come down a bit. So as wages gradually increase, it'll improve affordability. So, in a way, it's a nice time for buyers. I mean, it's still horribly over expensive, but it's getting a little bit easier. But if you're upsizing in London, it's happy days because it's now cheaper to upsize than it has been for a long time. In other words, the differential, more expensive properties have come down further in price than the lower end properties. Because as a first time buyer, the horrible thing is that you are now also competing with people who are downsizing because of the economy is getting tougher. So there are people losing well-paid jobs, not getting new jobs, and they're having to sell their more expensive houses. And they're downsizing into the cheaper ones, and that's creating unwanted competition for first-time buyers trying to get a home.
Okay, so I am your nephew. I'm just out from uni. I'm about to start a new job, and I come to you. I say, Uncle Charlie, I want to get onto the property market. Now, I can either go by way of flats or renting or house. I have, one of my uncles, we shan't mention his name. He left some inheritance for me. I've got about £90,000 as a down payment. What advice could you give me?
Well, I would first want to, let's say that I'm assuming you're planning to stay in London indefinitely and you have no plans to leave London. London's going to be your home. You have two options. You can rent as economically as you can and save up, in addition to your £90,000, save and invest, save and invest, save and invest until you build up enough money to buy somewhere outright, so you aren't having to borrow money and a mortgage to get it. And the advantage, there are people say rent is just money down the drain. It's not necessarily true because there are two advantages with this. As my nephew, I would say to you, you don't know what's going to happen in life, right? A lot of things are going to change. Your working life is going to change. Your romantic life is going to change. All kinds of things could change. And when you're renting, it gives you amazing freedom and flexibility to move with the changes that come in your life, especially if you don't have children yet and that kind of thing. Yes, you are at risk of a bad landlord kicking you out when you don't want to be kicked out, but generally speaking, that's not the common experience. It's more common if you look after the place you're living in and you pay the landlord's rent on time, they tend to leave you alone and they tend to not put the rent up. So taking a long-term view, if you behave well, your landlord likes you, they're not going to put the rent up on you. And actually, as the years go by, your rent effectively is decreasing as your income goes up and you can start to save more and save faster. And so this way, you're accumulating you're growing your 90,000 and you're adding to it with your savings each month and you're keeping your eye open on what you might be able to buy outright for money. And in this particular market, especially right now, I don't see prices rising for the next 5 to 10 years. You don't have to worry about house prices getting away from you. So that's one option, right? You rent as economically as you can, because also the other benefit of renting is you are never going to get hit with an unexpected maintenance bill, like the central heating's gone, or the boiler breaks, or the roof leaks, or anything else like that. That's not your problem. It's the landlord's problem. They're going to take care of all of that. You're never going to have to pay more than your rent. That's it. And that is actually quite a nice insurance policy. You know what you're earning, you know what your rent costs, you know what your bills are, you know what you can save, and you can plan like that. Now, if ownership is if you're like saying, well, listen, Uncle Charlie, I'm sorry, I hear what you're saying, but I just want to own my own place and I want to make it my own and that kind of stuff. So how do I get to ownership fast? Well, I would say that the Labour government is talking about leasehold reform, and leasehold reform is desperately needed. And until leasehold reform comes in, leasehold properties are going to get less and less popular and cheaper, because they're getting riskier and riskier as service charges are getting higher and higher. So I would say definitely don't buy one until we know what's happening with the leasehold reform. But as soon as it looks like that's going to get sorted out, okay, then it's time to consider buying. But there's too much uncertainty around leases at the moment, I think. Now, there are exceptions, and there are some places where you get a brand new build, it's a really high quality build, the lease is good quality, and the risks are low. And what I would say to everyone that one day would like to own a home is keep your eye open all the time. And if you see anything coming along that you think might be what you want, go and have a look. Go and view it. Just go and view it and say to the agent, "Yeah, I'm renting, but I've got money in the bank. I've got a big enough deposit. I can get a mortgage if I need one." So it's like, just keep your eye, because things change all the time. But if buying is a must and you've got your deposit, your £90,000, this is a good deposit, and your salary allows you to get a mortgage that's enough to buy properties within your price range in London, then buy with extreme caution in this market, because I do not think prices are going to go up. I think they're going to come down. And if you've got a mortgage, you could end up losing some of your 90,000, okay? Especially if you buy a new build, because new builds, it's like buying a car from a showroom. The minute you drive it out the door, the price comes down. It's the same with a new build. And if life takes a twist and a turn, you want to change where you're going, suddenly you might want to sell it, and you find that you can't sell it because it's actually now worth less than your mortgage. So it's in London specifically. If I didn't really need to own somewhere, I would be taking my sweet time. I would be quietly sitting back watching, saving. If I found somewhere I thought was an absolute steal, a fantastic bargain, a great deal, great quality, go and view it and offer. Make it. And last bit of advice, never pay attention to the asking price. It doesn't matter what the asking price is, because you go and look at it, you work out what it's worth to you, you offer what it's worth to you and no more. And if they don't accept it, then you walk away. But I would recommend to anyone starting out, keep your options open for as long as you can.
Would you say that, and this is your opinion, of course, would you say that the new builds are a good investment to have in London?
As a home or as a pure investment?
A bit of both.
In a word, no, not anymore. They were. I did a video just over a year ago. I remember it specifically. I've done hundreds, and I forget most of them, but the one I remember, I was in Norway when I did it. And it's entitled "The 40-Year Property Party is Over." Because it has been, it really has been a party. It's been easy money, rich pickings, no problem if you knew how to get into it. But those days are gone, and I would not be expecting. I mean, yeah, I could go into it, but I think it's really off topic for this particular conversation. But there's not going to be any significant house price growth in London for the foreseeable future. So, in terms of when you ask your question is it a good investment? Today, no.
Mm. I find myself knocking on the walls. If friends of mine tell me, oh, they're going to view a property, I always knock on the wall to see whether it's hollow or if it's rock, or well, if it's stone. And if it's hollow, I say, mm-mm, no, 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 let's go. But if it's solid, and I said, okay, yeah, I can hear that tap. The dead are communicating. So, to the flip side, from a person, your nephew, who has £90,000 as a deposit, to those who can't even afford it, because I know you champion against ending, not against, but you're championing, what are my words today, ending homelessness. Now, I'm sure there's a story to be had there. Why are you on the campaign to end such a terrible thing that people are going through? And of course, it's a noble cause, no doubt.
I honestly think this goes back to how I was raised. I was very fortunate. I was raised in a wealthy family. I had a big extended family. Everyone was very comfortably off, and I grew up, yeah, with one of the nicest and most magical childhoods you could ever dream of. I really did. Not without challenges, we all have challenges, but generally speaking, by comparison to most people, I was a lucky guy. But I was also taught something, which is that if your life's not okay, then you focus on yourself and getting yourself to the point where you're okay. Once your life is okay, you have a responsibility to help others. It's like it's a duty. It's like, if you're okay and you're not helping other people, you're not a positive contribution to your community or your society. Now, it just turns out that my whole career was never planned to be in the property sector, but it has been. I studied politics. I went into the city and was a city trader for about 5 years. So I understand politics, I understand economics, and I have a better understanding of the mechanics of the housing market than almost anybody. And you combine that with politics and economics, and I start to look at the whole housing market, which is in crisis, right? From a functionality point of view, it doesn't function properly. Moving is too difficult, too slow, too expensive. And we've got 750,000 officially empty properties. 750,000 government figures, long term, not second homes, not like, but actually empty, long term empty properties sitting there. And we've got 250,000 people in temporary accommodation. And if you're in temporary accommodation, your life is on hold. You can't live in a hotel room. You can't live in a B&B. You're existing. You can't grow. You can't raise a family there. You can't do your own personal professional development in that environment. And I've just been studying for a long time and looking, and I think that the government spends a huge amount of money on the homelessness problem, huge amount of money every year. Charities spend a huge amount of money every year, but they're going backwards, and homelessness numbers are going up. And just this month, new record homelessness figures were announced, all-time record high homelessness, and climbing at the rate of over 1,000 households a month becoming homeless. It's a horrific number. And it's just a systemic dysfunction. It's not because there isn't a solution, but unfortunately, the government is not working well enough with the charity sector, which is not working well enough with the property sector. There's no cooperation and collaboration in a way that actually this all helps each other out to solve this problem. And the upside of solving this problem isn't just the relief for the individuals concerned and the people it's better for the whole of society. It's better for the whole country if you got that many people who are suddenly able to get on their feet and then make a life and move on with their life. It's better for the taxpayer, it's better for the government, it's better for society, it's better for crime rates, it's better for everything. It's better for mental health, it's better for suicide rates, you name it, right? And the trouble is that no one is taking the big bird's eye view and going, we kind of need to knock everyone's heads together and get them to work alongside each other, all rowing in the same direction, because this problem is solvable. And I've got kids, I've got young kids, and as a father, I want them to think that I'm their hero, right? I want my kids to look at me and go, because kids don't do what you say, they do what you do. They watch you and they copy you. And when you say to them, don't do that, do what I say, they're like, no, I'm watching you. I'm watching what you're doing and how you're living your life. And succeed or fail, I don't care, as long as they see me trying my best to make the biggest difference that I'm capable of making. Because I also think that that's the only way we find happiness. If you aren't striving to make the biggest difference you're capable of, then somewhere deep inside, he's like, I'm under fulfilling my own life here. And you get a lot of people who give money to charity and they do a bit here and they do a bit there, but actually they're just scratching the surface of what they're capable of. And when there are that many people who are in need, you need to give it 100%. And I don't think charity is the answer. I think charity is relief. It's temporary relief for those who are homeless, but it is not a solution to the problem, no matter what they say. Obviously they like to do it, but with the best will in the world, they can't do it because they aren't policymakers. And the government on its own can't do it because it needs to work with the providers of accommodation and the property sector as a whole. And that whole relationship is distorted at the moment between banks and lenders and mortgages and property investors and the government. It's just, nobody is trying to solve this problem. That might sound like a ridiculous statement. Lots of people say they want to solve the problem. Oh, we're going to try and end homelessness. And I actually put a video out that went viral recently making a very public criticism of the homelessness charity Shelter. Because in my mind, with the best of intentions, they are making the problem worse. They're an example of why charities aren't working. In the last year that they published their accounts, they spent £82 million. £20 million of that was spent on fundraising. Spending £20 million fundraising. And the rest was spent on giving advice. They don't provide any shelter whatsoever. But what they do is they also lobby. And Shelter is responsible for lobbying the government going back some time. And unfortunately, where they're right is that the number one source of homelessness is landlords evicting tenants to sell a home. Now, in the government's own figure, the most recent numbers are that 68% of all new homelessness cases where the council has accepted them as a homeless situation to deal with, 68% the cause is a landlord evicting a tenant at no fault. You ask landlords why they're doing it, the landlords are saying because the conditions have changed for us, that it's no longer viable for us to remain landlords. So we've got no choice. We're literally being driven out. And you look at the policies that have happened, that governments changed those policies that are driving the landlords out, and those policies were lobbied for by Shelter. So Shelter is actually saying, we want to end homelessness. And they are achieving exactly the opposite. And when they've been told that, they just do this, they won't listen. So it's a very, very sad, I could say the same about government, right? And also I could level the same accusation to the whole property market and say that as a whole, the property market is not doing nearly enough to support this problem. Now, there are a few companies that do fantastic work and raise a lot of money and raise awareness of homelessness. But the truth is, unfortunately, and I've done my research on this, people don't care about homelessness enough to do anything or vote about it. And it is a horribly overlooked problem. And I have a plan. It's a moonshot of a plan. But it brings together governments and charities and the property sector, not in a charitable way. So it's not about getting people to give, just to work intelligently together in a way that, in a phased approach, actually alleviates the problem. And the first step of really alleviating that problem is reducing the supply of newly homeless people, where you have tenants who are at no fault, they've never been late with their rent, they haven't done anything wrong with the property, they're all paid up, they've got jobs, they're in work, and they end up homeless because the landlord is selling the property and they cannot afford another home and they cannot find another home. And they literally end up on the council's doorstep saying, like, what's happened to our life? We're hardworking people, we've hardworking, honest, law-abiding people paying our rent, and now we're homeless. That is avoidable. And if you avoid, that I worked out that if you took about 1/3 of new homelessness cases off the plates of councils and charities, the resources that they have left will go a lot further to helping those who are unavoidably homeless. So we have this. There are more complicated problems to get to, and we're not going to go into that here. I don't think we have time for that. But step one is a massive step in the right direction, and it's an easy step because it's not about talking about people's like substance abuse problems, it's nothing about that. It's like no. 1/3 in the long term. It's currently 2/3, but in the long term, 1/3 of all new homelessness is completely avoidable. These people are in work and paid up. The system is broken if people who are in work and paid up on their rent are being made homeless. That is a fundamental flaw. That's fixable. But it needs someone with the vision and the influence and the drive to bring that about. And that's my chosen goal. But to turn it into something happier.
Sorry.
What I want to do eventually, my dream has always been just to be a filmmaker. And so if I can make the inroads I want to make and it starts to work out how I want it to work, then that will be my reward to myself. I'll be able to go make films.
Okay. Going back to the issue of homelessness, is it right to say that with the government and charities, everything's kind of tied up in red tape?
Yes.
Because it seems like some of the issues can be solved, fixable, but there's so much red tape in place. So if there's so much red tape in place, why don't you just, well, not you personally, why can't they just remove the red tape to make things happen? Or could it be that there's something more sinister underneath where money comes into play again?
It's a combination of those two things. So, look in the charity sector. Shelter, for example, it's an enormous organisation. It's £70 million a year it goes through, and a lot of very highly paid people. And just doing an objective analysis, like this is not a productive organisation. By any metric, they're failing. And so that needs to be questioned, but nobody will question it. And the people who are there, you look at the board of directors there, they're all nice and titled and hoity-toity, and but they're all taking very nice salaries. Thank you very much, right? And they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that what they're doing isn't working. They literally won't even listen to it. They won't accept any criticism. But in government, it's much more complicated. I've worked directly with people in councils who are trying to find homes for people. And they're saying that the biggest problem is that landlords don't want to accept people from councils because they're higher risk tenants. And the councils that I was speaking to were saying, that's true and that's fair in some cases, but not in all. And we've got some people who are coming through the council system that we need to find homes for who are absolutely not high risk people. They're in work, they've got degrees, everything's fine, but landlords, it's just an automatic no. So there are all kinds of things that could be improved. And the red tape that the councils are faced with, the real solution, the easy solution to this problem, I say easy, it's a simple solution, is if, the government spends, and brace yourself, for how much they spend on temporary accommodation each year for homeless people. It's £1.7 billion a year. Now that is paying rent to hotels, hostels, and bed and breakfasts. £1.7 billion a year. If they were to, and it doesn't solve the problem. That money isn't improving anything. If they were to spend a similar amount building social housing purely for housing people that the government has an obligation to house, that money would have a return on it. It would have a multiple return on it. First of all, they'd have somewhere to put people that they don't have to pay for it. So they're immediately saving money on the temporary accommodation they're having to pay for. Secondly, the people who are going to live in those places are no longer in temporary accommodation, they're now in a home, and they can get back on their feet and become a productive tax-paying citizen again. And thirdly, it means that the government it owns the asset of this housing stock, which it must not sell, and that has a value. So to the taxpayer, it's a much better use of that money. And what I've always said is that the government should not have to rely on the private sector to meet the government's own housing needs. But until it builds enough social homes where they're needed, the problem's going to keep on getting worse. And driving landlords out, there are plenty of bad landlords. The bad landlords should be sought out and kicked out and moved out or penalised or fined or whatever it is. But there are mostly good landlords. I mean, my definition of a good landlord is happy tenant. If a tenant is happy, that's a good landlord. Because the tenant is only happy because the rent they're paying is fair, they like the home they're living in, and they want to stay there. That is a good landlord by any definition, right? And everything that's being done is harming all those good landlords as well as the bad ones, and it's counterproductive. And what I would do if I was in power is I would issue councils an immediate power to issue on-the-spot fines for landlords who are breaching. And I'd protect the tenants who are afraid of reporting their landlords by saying, if you make a report that a landlord is breaching a regulation, and we come around and find that they are breaching the regulation, two things happen. First of all, that landlord gets slapped with a fine in order to fix the problem. And thirdly, they automatically now cannot evict you from that property for at least the next 2 years. Automatically, they lose their right to evict if they have broken the regulations. I promise you, that simple measure, right? Give councils the power that if a tenant reports a breach, and if it's a real breach, and a council inspector goes around and finds a breach by the landlord, instant fine, reparation order to fix the problem, and that tenant cannot now be evicted for a minimum of 2 years because you don't want to get revenge evictions happening. I can tell you something, landlords around the country would rush to fix the problems that they're not currently fixing very, very quickly if that was in place. It would be such a strong deterrent. And without having to change the law, without any new regulations, any new legislation being passed, you would either flush out the bad landlords very quickly, or they would start to behave better. That simple.
So it's more or less a question of bringing that into fruition, have like some kind of enforcement to make that happen. But alas, as things stand, especially with local councils having cuts to their funding, it becomes you know what, there's so much we can go in, but there's a much more we'd like to talk about. But thank you for that breakdown. So let me but let's talk about moving home with Charlie. How did that come into being?
It came into being because of my frustration with all other attempts at marketing my national property website, which, by the way, is hopefully going to be the root of the solution to these problems. It's called Best Agent. And Best Agent aspires to become the home movers platform. So think of it a bit like Rightmove, but where you can actually transact. Not just a brochure site where you look up stuff and inquire, but actually where you can begin the transaction process. And the goal is to halve transaction times, which benefits everybody, buyer, seller, and agent, they're all benefited, and bring transparency to house prices, both on sales and on lettings. And I was trying to market this, and I was doing everything you're supposed to do. You do advertising, you do PR, you do paid advertising, you do marketing, you do promotions, and all of it was incredibly expensive. None of it worked. Just tumbleweed, pouring money and time out the door. Nobody cared. And I became aware of the fact that there are some people who on YouTube were building an audience. And I thought to myself, hang on a second, if you can build an audience, then your only investment is the time recording the video. And after that, you get a return on that investment every time somebody watches it. You get to control your own messaging rather than journalists messing it up and giving it the wrong headline and the wrong message, pigeonholing you in the wrong pigeonhole. And I just got so fed up of years and years and years and years of trying to do marketing in the conventional way. And even when I got the publicity, the message wasn't right. So it was wasted publicity because I couldn't control it. And I thought, right, I want something that I'm going to spend money on. I want something that doesn't get the message wrong. And someone was saying to me, Charlie, what you've learned about the home moving process is really valuable. So go out and share it. And so I started this. And I mean, for the first 2 years, I got just, well, 2 years? Yeah, I think it was 2 years. So first year at least anyway, nothing, tumbleweed. I got 200 subscribers, just absolutely nothing. And then it caught a wave and it picked up. And I think, I mean, I've had 5 million views in the last 12 months across all the platforms, YouTube and X and LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram and Twitch. And yeah, 5 million views and climbing. And I think I'm now the most watched home moving channel there is now. And what I love about it, I mean, I get a bit sweary sometimes. I get a bit passionate, but you know, nobody tells me what I can and can't say. And I think the audience appreciates the fact that here is someone talking about the property market without saying, hey, everything's fine. It's great. House prices are going up. Buy, 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 buy. Borrow, borrow, borrow. You know, people are actually like, oh my God. The feedback I get is, what a relief. You're the only person just telling it like it is and calling bullshit, you know. So yeah, I mean, I called it Moving Home with Charlie because I didn't want people to confuse it with a property investment channel, because there are a million of those, and I'm absolutely not that. I'm here to help people move home more easily by effectively also sharing the tricks of the trade, which estate agents do not thank me for. But I said to them, guys, look, hang on, you're going to get better qualified movers once they've learned from me. Like, yeah, but they're a bit too good at negotiating. They know the game too well now. Like, yeah, but are they moving? Are they buying more quickly? Yes, they are. Are they selling more quickly? I'm giving you better quality inquiries. And they're like, yeah, okay, fair enough, that's true. So my goal is to make moving easier so that more people can move, because that helps social mobility as well. So Moving Home with Charlie it's just a channel where I talk about the housing market and where I help individual movers to move home with advice, and I have live Q&As multiple times a week. And I also campaign on the political and economic issues affecting the housing market.
What episode has the most views from Moving Home with Charlie?
If you'd asked me that a week ago, it would have been a different answer. I've had the most viral video ever done go viral. So until last week, it was an episode called Home Seller Secretly Films 11 Estate Agents. And actually that's had the most views. That's had 350,000 views. And that was a documentary, basically. It took 6 months to make that. But it gets the point across that all estate agents are not the same, and you should choose your estate agent like your future depends on it, because if selling your house is part of your future, then it does depend on the choice of agent. And too many people think that all agents are the same, and that's not true. That's had 350,000 views. So currently that is the most viewed video. But that overtook the first one. So the 8 reasons house prices are going to collapse was the #1 most viewed video, 150,000 views, until about 3 months ago. But I put a video out on Friday night, just 4 or 5 days ago, and it was a 7-minute video. I was at home alone with the kids. I just chucked them, gave them some food, closed the door, and I quickly went on live stream. And I reported the fact that a former colleague of Rachel Reeves was accusing her of dishonesty on her CV. And he was the head of banking operations at Lloyd's Banking Group when she worked as a junior customer complaints handler at Halifax, where she'd said she was an economist, and she wasn't. And all I did was I got this LinkedIn post from the guy and he just said, please share this news far and wide, and told this whole story about Rachel Reeves, and he tagged her in the LinkedIn post, and I just read it out. That's had, in 4 days, it's had 200,000 views on YouTube in 4 days. As we speak, It's still getting about 1,000 views an hour. And I suspect that might end up becoming the most viewed video.
Mm.
And the reason it's
Interesting.
important is because I was campaigning before the election to say, I'm not party political. I am politically neutral, but I criticise policies for all governments. And I was warning before the election that Rachel Reeves was not qualified enough and experienced enough to be Chancellor. It's too important a role for someone with her level of experience, lack of experience. And I'm being proved right because, in my view, and again with my own background in the city, in the financial markets, and in politics, studying politics, I suspect she's on track to be the Chancellor that does the most damage to the British economy in history. And unfortunately, that hurts the housing market and it hurts homelessness. And this is why I'm talking about it on this channel, because homelessness is already rising at a record rate. And it will continue to rise even faster based on her policies.
Mm. And what's been the one question you find answering again and again from your subscribers or from people who listen to your YouTube channel?
Should I buy now or should I wait?
Okay. And what would you say to that?
If you want and need a home and you found one that you can afford without overstretching yourself, always buy now. Never wait. But don't overpay. That's the hard part. Always buy, don't overpay.
Mm. What would you say is, of course, depending on the person's budget, that should always come into question, but what would you consider as overpaying?
Putting yourself in financial stress so that if anything goes wrong in your life, you suddenly won't be able to afford the payments and you might be in negative equity. So overpaying means putting yourself, it means something different for each person, right?
Mm.
There are people who can afford to overpay and they've got spare money and they don't mind paying more than everyone else because they need that property in that place. They need it now. They can afford it. They don't care. They overpay. That's fine. It's like people who pay a premium for a car that's got a long waiting list. There are people who are happy to overpay. The list price is 50 grand. They're happy to pay 60 grand just to get it now. There are times when overpaying is what people choose to do. The trouble is when a first-time buyer with a 95% mortgage is tricked into overpaying and then ends up losing their home 5 years down the line in negative equity with a debt around their neck they can't pay off. That's the problem. And that's why I always say don't overpay, because thousands of people a year lose their homes for this reason. So walk away, don't overpay. Make your offer, your maximum comfortable offer that you can afford in your circumstances. And I call it the first and final offer. Don't open with a low bid and then get into a negotiation, because you'll always lose, because these guys are more experienced than you, right?
Okay.
Work out your own comfortable maximum price, make that price in writing, not over the phone or email, put it in an email. And if they accept it, great. And if they don't, walk away. And always be prepared to walk away. Never overpay if you are not very comfortably financially off. It's too much of a risk.
What would you say, in your opinion, is a legalized ripoff when it comes to buying property in the UK? For me, I think it's stamp duty.
Well, stamp duty isn't just a legalized rip-off. Stamp duty is it's a tax on social mobility. And if they were to just completely eliminate stamp duty and replace it in other fairer ways, you'd see the number of people moving house would double. It would double. There'd be a cascading effect. It would unlock so many people who currently wouldn't move because the stamp duty is so high. And actually, especially at the higher end of the market, so the stamp duty is, you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 25,000 pounds stamp duty. People are like, that's going to stop me moving. I'm just not going to move. I'm not going to hand over 25. No. So that's the first thing. New homes where they are so good at convincing people to overpay, so you end up paying over the top for a house that won't be worth what you paid for it for another 5 or 10 years until the markets come back. That's a legalized ripoff. And I try to teach people on my channel how to negotiate better, especially in this market. And they tell you that, they're very convincing salespeople. No. This is the price. We can't change the price. That's the price. If you want the house, you have to pay the price. It's just not true. If you put a credible offer down, that's not what they want, but you're the only one, they will bring the price down. When they start offering financial incentives, like we'll pay your mortgage for a year, we'll contribute to that's just overpricing. That's when they say we'll pay your mortgage for a year, what they're doing is putting that extra price on top of the house, and you're borrowing that extra price and paying interest on it. So never take financial incentives to buy. I mean, the only exception is this: if they're offering you a deposit, that means the difference between being able to buy the home or not buy the home. There can be reasons when that is okay, yeah, that's worth doing. But otherwise, when it comes to incentives for new build, you should only be asking for upgrades to the property, stuff that actually adds value to the property. But you should also be asking for the discount.
I guess there's a lot of double speak when you read or when you listen to certain property developers or the government. If you don't read between the lines, you may just as well fall victim to, in many instances, it's a scam. No, I'm not saying the whole housing market. I'm just saying certain things are a scam. But I think one should pay attention to what's being sold.
The biggest scam of all is the narrative around house prices. It's totally false. And it's why so many sellers think their homes are worth about 20% more than they really are. And there's no outright lying. It's just manipulation and gaslighting that creates this impression of high house prices. And I won't bore you and go into it, but it really does. And it creates the problem we've got now where people can't sell their houses. I mean, the other legalized rip-offs, I mean, watch just always, the financial products, always take financial products with care. Look how many mis-selling scandals there are now in terms of big banks being PPI mis-sold, now the car loan finance mis-sold. I'm not saying that's happening with mortgages, but look out for the sting in the tail of the mortgage clauses. I mean, the other big legalized rip-off at the moment is service charges. Service charges on.
Yeah. Okay. We'll come back to housing because you are a fountain of knowledge. But let's talk about Charlie the person. Now, when I started the podcast episode, I mentioned that you're a philanthropist, filmmaker, a seaplane pilot, homeschooling parent, startup entrepreneur. I am interested in the homeschooling parent section. Now, I read on your bio that, let me just make sure I've got the right notes here. You helped with the delivery of both of your kids.
Well, that's out of date now. All three of my children, yes, I did.
All three?
All three of those, my children were born into my hands.
When it happened the first time, now I'm not a squeamish person. I work on a magazine which is called Midwives for Royal College of Midwives. So the things these eyes have seen, but that's in print. You, on the other hand, experienced it. What was that like for you, if you don't mind sharing?
It was magical because all three of them were in a birthing pool, just like a big jacuzzi, basically, without the bubbles. And their mother was leaning with her back up, right, and so on her knees, leaning on the side of the bath with her back up. So gravity helped the delivery. And so all three babies came out underwater. So they were born into a floaty, warm thing. My first child, Clara, she now knows that she's 9 years old. I got distracted, so her head popped out, and that was quite okay. Oh my god, there's her head. And I looked away for a minute, and the rest of her popped out, and she sort of floated down to the bottom. So I actually didn't catch her. People say I dropped her. I didn't drop her, but I had to scoop her up off the bottom of the pool. But then I got to put her in my lap with just her face above the water. And you can see in the umbilical cord, you can actually see the pulsating. And they say, just leave it until the pulsating stops, because after a while, when she starts breathing, pulsating will stop. And then the midwife handed me the scissors, and I cut the cord myself. And then I was able to, so I was the first one to touch and hold, and I was in the birthing pool myself, just in my swimming trunks. And I got to hold them to my skin, so skin to skin, which is what you're supposed to do with them. And I got to hold them for and then it gave their mum a chance to sort herself out and just get comfortable again. And once she was then comfortable in the bed, I was able to then give her the baby, and it was just it's magical. And I like being able to tell my kids now that I was the first person that ever touched them, and
Wow.
it was magical.
And if you don't mind me asking, can all three swim properly? Are they good swimmers?
Not the 2-year-old yet, but the other two can, yes.
And from what I see, you also homeschool the kids. Now, was that a decision you both made, your wife and yourself, or was it from any personal experiences? Or if you don't mind sharing,
I
what
don't know.
was
I'm
your
very happy
reasoning
to share.
behind that?
I mean, it's a privilege to be in the position to even have it as an option, right? It's very important to acknowledge that. And for a lot of people, it simply isn't an option. But it was actually a TED talk that I saw long before I met their mother. And it's called "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" And it's by this amazing guy called Sir Ken Robinson, who sadly died recently. And it was back in 2006 or 2008. It was the most viewed TED talk of all time. And everyone, I wasn't a father. That was 9-10 years before I became a dad. And that podcast, that TED talk, it was a done deal right there and then for me. It's like, that's it. I'm it was, and if you watch it, you'll see why. And so my reasons, I have my reasons. Their mum has different reasons. Her reasons were because she had terrible experience at school, hated it. It was just a really, really unhappy time for her. My reasons are different from that. I was very lucky. I had amazing school experiences. I mean, but I make the decision now in the context of where we are in today's world with the internet. Right? The internet wasn't around when I was at school. Now it is. There are now more options to learn. You can now learn anything you want, everything. The sum of all human knowledge is on the internet. And what is true of all children is that all children learn fastest when they're learning at their own speed, at their own pace. And different children learn different subjects at different speeds. And so I found that we don't have any classroom stuff happening. What we do is it's guided self-teaching. So we're always around, we just let them get on with it themselves, and they can pretty much do whatever they like. Now, they are both reading and writing well ahead of their time. We never taught them to do it. It's just with games, and you get some cool apps that have it. And right now, for example, both of them are obsessed with the 9-year-old and the 7-year-old. They're obsessed with learning Portuguese on the Duolingo app. That's all we've done is make them aware that it's possible. And they'll do it themselves. And so there's no homework, there's no classes. They go out all the time. So that we go out to lots of other classes. There's a gym class, there's a martial arts class, there's a trampolining, there's a dance class, there's a singing, and they get to meet a whole range of other kids on a regular basis that are all different ages and all different backgrounds. But I travel a lot with my work as well, because part of my team works in Lisbon, and I have reasons to go to Norway and the States, and it means that they can travel with us, and that in itself is an education for a kid. But most of all, I get to spend more time with them, which is just magical. And I worry about children's safety in schools at the moment, any kind of school. Genuinely, I worry about their safety, both physical safety and their mental health. And at the moment, in this particular country, at this particular time, I feel that they're safer. I'm happy that we take responsibility for their well-being. I don't want to outsource that, which is what you're doing when you put them in school, Now, they play with the neighbours' kids all the time. They're best friends with the neighbours' kids. The neighbours' kids are in school. And so they always have interesting conversations. The neighbours' kids don't understand why my kids aren't at school, and they are, and they talk about it. But so far so good. We keep on reviewing the situation, and if they want to go to school, it's like, no, we want to try that one, then that's cool, because I'm trying to teach them to make their own decisions and learn the lessons themselves. My goal is that whenever they choose to fly the nest, they are independent thinkers. They know how to think, and I try to teach them how to think, not what to think. I teach them to question me. I teach them to question everything. and I teach them to solve problems for themselves. I'll show you something. So I've got this. So can you see that? This is my jeans, right? See that repair?
Yes.
So I put my toe through the hole and it caused that big tear. And I was going to throw them away. My daughter said, "Oh, I think I can mend those for you." And I said, "Really?" And she went, "Yeah." And she just looked it up on YouTube, taught herself, and then she repaired my jeans and gave them to me. And now actually she started repairing other clothes for me. And now she started charging me for the repairs because she's worked out that yeah, it's fair enough. And like, she's
Smart
saving me
girl.
money. She saved these jeans are going to go in the bin, right? I get almost all my clothes come from charity shops anyway because I'm a bootstrapper. I save money as much as I can. So, but and so I'm teaching them the value of money, that you have to do something valuable to get money, that money requires work, it requires doing something you perhaps don't want to do. We never give them money. They can if they want it, they've got to earn it somehow. And so at the moment, it's under constant review, but at the moment, it's the best decision I've ever made in my life. Their mum thinks it's the same, but for different reasons. We get to spend more time with our kids. It's an absolute privilege. I mean, to me, it's just heavenly, heavenly. I mean, are there frustrating times and days? Yes. But I wouldn't have it any other way, and I would put it down as the best decision I've ever made.
I'd have to agree with you to an extent, especially when I talk to my nephew who's 11 years old and he tells me what he studies at school. And his dad and I, whenever I go and see him in the morning, he's always watching Bloomberg, looking at the stock market, and also listening to the news. And when I was growing up, never had that opportunity at all. But now we're at that point in his life where what we never had, we're now giving to him. We have full grown conversations with him. We talk to him about the stock market. We talk to him about finance. I don't know jack about the stock market, but now I'm in a position where, okay, I have an idea. Okay, I'm at an age now whereby you're never too young, you're never too old, but he's very young. Let him start getting used to certain things. And the most important thing is I always say to him, make sure you question everything. Yes,
Always.
the teachers are there to give you some understanding, but you've got to look at their curriculum. What are they teaching? And some of the information they're teaching isn't the right information. Question it. If you're not happy with the response, come to me. I'm not a Poindexter. I will ask someone else who's got more brains than me so that they know. And you're in a position where you've got the kids traveling with you. I mean, I always say travel is the best educator. When you travel, you go out there. So keep up the good work.
Thank
Keep up the good work, indeed. Now we are at that point in the podcast. I mean, we could keep on chatting long and long and on, but we're now at that point where I'm going to now ask Chris what his quote that he would like to share with us on today's episode.
Charlie.
Oh, sorry. I apologize.
That's
I
okay.
apologize. Charlie.
No, that's fine. No problem. So my quote, which I think I'm correct in saying came from a writer called Arthur Ashe, with an E on the end of the Ash, which just landed with me the first time I ever saw it. I've never forgotten it. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can.
Okay.
And I can't think of anyone in any situation that is not helpful, useful guidance for. Wherever you are in life, wherever you want to be going, whatever you want to be doing, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And if I could add one more thing to that, and which is something else that is a mantra I live my life by and I teach my children, find a way.
That's fascinating. Now, you've mentioned you travel a lot, and I'm sure you pick up a lot of languages or certain things. How would you say either one in any language of choice?
God, you can't. That's um, My languages aren't that strong. I mean, I got a bit. I speak a tiny bit, lots of languages. French is my strongest, and I find myself wanting to slightly change the translation of this. Find a way. In French, I would say "trouve la vie," which would be find your life.
Hey, it works for me. So, apart from all what you do, you're also a seaplane pilot.
Uh,
Now, dude, I have to ask you, when you see Tom Cruise, oh snap, you okay, for those of you listening, Charlie's just showed me the Seaplane Pilots Association.
yeah.
How does one get one of those?
It's choosing a hobby. So choosing aviation as a hobby, which I recommend to anybody to try. You don't have to commit to getting your pilot's license. You can just go and have a few lessons, and you might get bit by the bug. But go and try it. Go and try it. And it was just a couple of years after I got my pilot's license, which I did just for fun, as a hobby. Right. I was in my late 30s by the time I did it. Somebody gave me a book. I can't remember who it was, and it was a book about flying seaplanes. And I read in this book that there are places in the world that can't be reached any other way but in a seaplane. And I was just like, I was hooked. I was like, oh, I want to see those places. I want to see those places where no one can go. And I want to take my kids to those places. And so I very quickly after that went down to Lake Como in Italy, which has the world's oldest seaplane base, Aero Club Como. And I got myself an Airbnb there. I was there for 5 days. And at the end of the 5 days, I had my seaplane pilot's license, my seaplane rating. And since then, I've now racked up around about 110 hours. That's engine time in a seaplane. Mostly in America, so partly in Alaska and in Maine. And I cannot describe what a magical thing to do it is. I've got, in fact, on my YouTube channel, I've got a personal YouTube channel, Charlie Lamdin, videos of me taking my children one at a time into the Norwegian fjords and flying around Norway and flying over the glacier, just me and them, just one to one, and letting them take the controls and then landing on the fjords and landing on the sea, landing in these lakes. And it sounds as magical as it is. I mean, it's just, I can't describe what a special, fulfilling, challenging, rewarding, exhilarating thing it is to do. And the memories I'm making with my kids, you know, it's I don't get to do it enough. I wish I could do it more. But it's something I'm really proud of. It's an accomplishment I'm proud of because it's been a real fight. It's been like the commitment. It's expensive too, but it's not as horribly out of reach as you might think it is. It's like I haven't spent more on flying than I used to spend in the pub.
That affordable.
I used to spend a lot in the pub. But I mean, when I was living in London, I worked out, I mean, it was one of the things, I remember my thought process. I was doing my budgeting, it was around about 2008, and I just got divorced, happy, amicable divorce, there were no children involved. And I had time, and I thought, I was going through my receipts, and I was looking at what I spent. I was like, God, I eat out almost every day, and I'm eating out and drinking out. I'm in London buying food and drinks out every single day. You know, that was coming to a lot of money. I thought I've got nothing to show for that money at the end of the month. What can I do that's constructive with that? And we'll have something to show for it. I thought, I'll go and try and have a go at that. And I did. And the rest is history.
Wow. So picture the scene, if you will. You're watching the new Mission Impossible with Tom Cruise flying everything and anything. Do you find yourself thinking, I could do that?
Especially in the lighter aircraft, perhaps not in the fast jets, right, where they're pulling 11 Gs. I've done aerobatics with one of my friends is an aerobatics world champion, actually, and he took me up. So the fighter jets are, I mean, it's such an extreme experience. The G-forces, that kind of stuff, it's brutal. It's not like a nice fun day out flying a fighter jet. But the lighter aircraft, and so Tom Cruise has got his own P-51 Mustang. it's like the American version of the Spitfire,
Yes.
and it's just that. Yes, yeah. I mean, yeah. I find myself thinking I'd need a few. You do what's called a differences training. So you for a new type of aircraft you haven't flown before, you need to do differences training, and then you can fly it. But yeah.
Okay. From flying to sticks, you're a drummer.
Yes.
What kind of music genre do you like playing to?
That's a very good question, because what I like playing to isn't necessarily the same as what I like listening to. I've drummed jazz and pop and rock and funk, and I think funk drumming is the most enjoyable. That's where I really get lost in it.
Okay, funk drumming. All right. Okay, so because I play bass,
Okay.
so I'm more into jazz,
Okay.
but I do like funk.
Yeah.
So who would you say is your go-to band or musician when it comes to funk?
You mean apart from James Brown?
Everyone goes to James. Come on, man.
Yeah, that's what I said. Apart from James Brown, there's something funky about Mark Ronson's music. I know it's
Okay.
very mainstream, but like, who else really gets me that feeling? I was listening to my kids just a couple of days ago. Oh, well, you've got me on the spot now.
I'm sorry.
No, because I mean, music is massive to me. I love music so much. I've already started taking my kids to gigs, and I'm coming up blank. Funk.
My go-to would always be Funkadelic, Parliament Funkadelic,
Okay.
with George Clinton. That's my go-to.
Okay.
Or any other time it might be Bootsy Collins and The One. If you ever want to know anything about funk and music, just listen to Bootsy Collins and The One.
Okay.
Which he was taught by James Brown, Mr. James Brown.
I will listen to that. Bootsy Collins, The One. I will listen to that straight after this. In fact, I'll go.
Yeah, just Bootsy Collins. Well, it's the whole idea of The One where you go on the downbeat with the one. So if you're going dun, 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 and one, da, 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 the one. So all funk. But anyway, we're going to a further place. Now, listen, Charlie, you are a busy man, but first of all, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. We've more or less come to the end of it. I appreciate you. Now, before we go, this is the part of the podcast where I just make scenarios up in my head, and hopefully you'll play along. So you're in a time machine and you are sent back to the past. Of course, there's a time machine. And you find yourself at Kitty Hawk.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there we go. And you get chatting to, the Wright brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been able to take back in time a piece of equipment.
What an amazing question.
What would it be? And while you're doing that, you're going to fly the brothers up in whatever aircraft you have or what have you. What soundtrack would you play to them as well?
Okay, right. What you don't know is that I've read the biography of those guys' story, and never mind aviation, from a business point of view, those guys who are bicycle makers succeeded in creating powered flight when the US government couldn't.
Amazing.
And the journey, the story of how they did it is the most inspiring business story and creativity story and overcoming adversity and what they put themselves through. And then when they finally actually had a demonstration flight, no one believed it. They thought it was a hoax. Everyone told them they were liars and they were scammers and grifters. It was just incredible. And then they went to the US government and said, hey, would you like to talk to us about aircraft for the US military? And they were dismissed with a standard boilerplate template letter. Sorry, we're not interested, even though the government did want airplanes. Honestly, the stories they went through are so. Anyway, that's by the by. But that was one of the best books I've ever read. That was gifted to me by a priest who I took up in a seaplane. He was my Airbnb host as well as a priest in Maine, USA, and he gave me that book as a gift to thank me for taking him up in the seaplane. What piece of equipment? Wow. The amount of equipment that's involved in aviation, that is a big question. Gosh, that's so hard. I'm going to have to come up with something quickly because I want to say autopilot, but actually that would be taking the joy out of it. I think some of the instruments in aircraft, as people who created aircraft, or the jet engine. The jet.
Okay, let me make it easier for you. Of course, you play. I mean, you fly seaplanes and maybe particular fixed wings.
Yeah.
But for the sake of argument, if you were to take, apart from a seaplane, of course, one fixed aircraft, fixed winged aircraft, back in time, a bit like the Philadelphia experiment,
Yeah.
but you're going to take one flying instrument back in time for you to fly the brothers up in, what would it be?
And it can't be a seaplane.
It cannot. No.
Wow. I would take them up in. I have a Cessna 182.
Okay.
And in the aviation community, in the general aviation community, that is by many people regarded as the best all-round light aircraft you can buy. For lots of reasons that don't make sense unless you're a pilot. But I think if they could see what their invention spawned, and the Cessna 182 was designed in the 1960s, and they're still making them to the same design today, 60 years later. So it's an amazing machine. And I just think that the comfort, the performance, it would be mind blowing for them. And I would just be, yeah. What there was the soundtrack. I don't know why, but Thunderstruck by AC/DC comes to mind.
Okay. Oh, they'll be thunderstruck, all right. So you've taken them up, you've flown them around, and you now have to come back to your timeline. What would you like to take back from their time back to ours? Yes, we can't take things and bring them back because of the time variance or whatever. But
I think I would come back and I would bring back the lack of mobile phones. I would come back to a world where there are no mobile phones.
why is that? Because I'm a
People connected.
big, I really hate, no, let me rephrase that. I don't mind mobile phones. I just think people are really distracted by mobile phones. People have become walking zombies. There's no situational awareness. People's necks are further down in the mobile phone rather than just being.
I'll
I don't
tell you
know.
exactly
Why that?
I'll tell you exactly why. Because what I've worked out in life is that all of the best things in life are rooted in relationships with friends or family or children or parent, whatever it might be. But all of your happiest days, happiest times, always with people who are special to you. And so for me, I've always nurtured my friendships and special relationships with people. I'll go ridiculous distances to go to someone's birthday or someone's wedding. I have flown to LA for a party and back because it was someone important and it was a special party. And I thought, well, hey, I could use the time on the plane. I will do that. Relationships are important. And I see the existence of the mobile phone as the number one cause of the degradation of people's relationships. Because they're so compelling. They like suck your attention out of the room and away from other people. And when you watch videos of live music events back from the days before there were mobile phones, how much happier does everybody look? How much more in the moment and involved and in the music is everyone? You see youngsters today doing reaction videos on YouTube of live events back then. And they're like, oh my God, that looks so incredible. Why don't we have it like that today? Why is it different today? I think it's because of mobile phones.
I am so glad I grew up in the 80s. Well, Charlie, once again, thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to us about what you do. I mean, we could have spoken about so much more, but alas, time is at a premium. So if people do want to get in touch and talk to you or get to know more about your channel, etc., how can they do so?
Um, I'm very easy to find. Moving Home with Charlie, if you want to find out about on any platform, Moving Home with Charlie, you'll find me, and you can direct message me on any social platform except for Snapchat, I think. If you're more interested in the aviation side of things and homeschooling, that kind of stuff, my personal YouTube channel, just Charlie Lamdin, it's just my name.
Excellent. And if you'd like to be a guest on the Swinging Palm Trees podcast, you can email me at theswingingpalmtree@gmail.com. And until next time, be well, rise and thrive, and have an amazing day. And we're done. Let me just press stop.